hello again. Haven't I seen you somewhere before? Today starts our Rector's Forum, and I had been asked by a few people to do a forum on the Enneagram, which is a personality typology system, and one that I have a little familiarity with and that I've used before. So I've put together a 10-week course. Usually our courses, we try to keep it about 6 weeks, but it would be hard to do an intro and 9 different types in a 6-week time span. It's already impossible to do it in 10, but I'm going to try. So what I'll do today is, this is kind of an overview. It will probably be an overwhelming amount of information, and some of it will probably even sound contradictory until we get into the individual types and we learn more about those. So, being a good college teacher, I do have a syllabus. Part of it, the part of it that's most relevant to you, I believe, is in the e-news. I hope the schedule's there. If it's not, I'll make sure it's there this week. So our course description is, this 10-week course is a survey of the Enneagram personality typology. The first week will be an overview of the system, and each week that follows will be an overview of each of the 9 basic types. This course is a journey of self-discovery, with each participant learning more about his or her own type and how the world is filtered through this type. This course will be streamed on Facebook Live and will involve interactions with viewers through use of video comments or questions. I did put in an optional text if you are interested, and that text is the basis of this course. I'm not making this stuff up. The Wisdom of the Enneagram, the complete guide to psychological and spiritual growth for the 9 personality types. And this is by Rizzo and Hudson. If you go to the Enneagram Institute, which I hope you have, because I did ask that you go ahead and take that test called the RETI, the R-H-E-T-I Enneagram test. It's available at tests.enneagraminstitute.com, but the website is largely Rizzo and Hudson based, so they are big names in the Enneagram community in the US. We'll learn a few other names today as well. So that is the course prerequisite. If you don't want to pay the $12, it is a fee for the Enneagram test, but I can assure you that you don't get spammed. It's not some junk test on Facebook or anything. You know, they take it very seriously, and they make sure it's up to date. So I ask that you do that if you are not comfortable doing that for some reason, or if you have trouble, you know, if you have a bunch of ties in terms of personality type, which happens sometimes for various reasons, then just make an appointment with me. I also have a very simple paper test that may or may not yield accurate results, but you can give it a try if you want. Sometimes I will use a paper test when there's a little confusion over type, or if you're not sure about your type, we'll pull that out. Always the teacher, I did put in a possible project, if you like, and that is to meet with your pastor / rector / spiritual director and discuss insights that you have gained from the course and how you might integrate these insights into your daily life. Or you might write a brief Enneagram autobiography detailing how your type has influenced your interactions in the world so far, and how knowledge of your type might change future decisions. So that would be an assignment for you. I'm not going to make a rubric and grade it. So everything exists here for your benefit, your personal benefit. So our schedule is such. Today is our introduction and overview. Next week will be a break because I will be on staycation. August 30th, we will look at the type 1. Then there will be a break for the Labor Day weekend, so we won't meet that weekend. Then we'll resume on September 13th and go all the way through November 8th. And then after that, I believe Tim has a class that he's developing, something related to misers, so from what I heard. So that sounds interesting. Okay, so that is kind of the map of the course as we go forward. Again, I'll try to get maybe this whole thing, if I didn't put it all in the e-news. So let's begin at the beginning. About the system, Enneagram expert Helen Palmer, so this is Palmer's book, The Enneagram, Understanding Yourself and the Others in Your Life. It's a pretty interesting book. I was thumbing through it the other day and got some new insights, some uncomfortable insights from this book. So she's really good too, but again, Rizzo and Hudson are probably the best well-known names. Anyway, in this book, Palmer writes, the term Enneagram was introduced by G.I. Gurdjieff, a pioneer in adapting Eastern spiritual teachings for use by modern Westerners. Gurdjieff, well aware of the useless suffering created by flaws in our personalities, taught that each of us had a chief feature that was the central axis around which the delusional aspects of our personalities revolved. If we could know the chief feature, the work of understanding and transcending the delusional aspects of personality, or false personality as Gurdjieff called it, since much of it was forced on us as children rather than being freely chosen by us, this would become much more efficient. Now, his methods were quite unorthodox. Palmer writes, although Gurdjieff did not believe that his students were capable of grasping the significance of their Enneagram type, he did a great deal to evoke the recognition of character. Two of his most reported methods were, quote, stepping on people's favorite corns, and, quote, the toasting of idiots. Gurdjieff was an 8 on the Enneagram, the point of the boss, as Palmer calls it, and true to type, his teaching method was to attune himself to the most sensitive areas of a student's character and to push hard until he got a defensive response. So basically, he drank a lot and insulted people. He threw these dinner parties and he would say things like, you're a turkey cock pretending to be a peacock. And obviously that would bring up issues in people and students. So what he came up with was just a rough outline of personality, though. Throughout the decades, other people from various countries and backgrounds have fleshed out the Enneagram into the system that I will attempt to teach you about in this course. Now, keep in mind that the Enneagram is a lifetime of study, so you aren't going to get all of the nuances in a 10-week course, even though 10 weeks is longer than we usually meet, as I said. Now, I am no expert, but I have used this system in my spiritual direction and pastoral work for a number of years. You might say I know enough to be dangerous. But I have much more to learn. And sometimes I'm dead wrong and have to correct a perception I have based on the Enneagram system. That's part of the learning process. So if you come to me and you think you're a type 3, and later it turns out you're a type 4, neither one of us should be devastated. You've just learned a little bit more about yourself and you've attuned more accurately to your type. So that's okay. People mistype very frequently, and sometimes I can help sort that out, and sometimes you have to sort of help me sort that out, because you know more about yourself and your internal mechanisms than I do. I can see the outside and observe outward tendencies, but I can't see your motivations, which is great. I don't want to sleep with that. Now, it was Deborah Kehoe who gave that wonderful talk on Thomas Merton who introduced me to the system when I was a brash 20-something-year-old prison teacher. She tells me, though, that as soon as I walked into her classroom at 19, bossing my friend Margaret Ribby around, she knew I was an 8. Don't worry, though. I will not drink and insult you in this course, at least not today. So, the Enneagram. While I like this book by Helen Palmer, the course is based largely on this book, The Wisdom of the Enneagram. So pretty much everything I say is either, there's quotations and summary of information from this book. Though, this book is a pretty big book. So essentially today's overview was 4 chapters I had to condense into 6 pages. So you're not going to get everything. Some of that is because I simply couldn't fit it in, and other is because I thought some of the concepts might be confusing outside of the context of your type. So you will still get some of the things I skipped for the intro, but they will be in the context of the different types, the individual types that we'll talk about. So here are the basic types. This is a quick synopsis, but we'll be spending a week with each type, so don't worry if you don't soak it all in today. I promise this is just tea. I'm not pulling a kerchief. Oh. It was really hot outside of that sign today. So, type 1 is called the reformer sometimes. These different, depending on the author and the text that you read, these they have different names, but Rizzo and Hudson do eventually say that the names we should probably shy away from because it gives us a kind of a predisposition to think about them in one way or another, whereas type 1, type 2, type 3, it's a level playing field. So the boss isn't better than the helper, the boss. It's just, here's your 2, here's an 8, it is what it is. So type 1, often called the reformer, but it's called by other names. The principled idealistic type. Ones are ethical and conscientious with a strong sense of right and wrong. They are teachers and crusaders, always striving to improve things but afraid of making a mistake. Well organized, orderly, fastidious, they try to maintain high standards but can slip into being critical and perfectionistic. They typically have problems with repressed anger and impatience. At their best, healthy ones are wise, discerning, realistic, and noble, as well as morally heroic. Now, it's important to remember that, we have elements of all these types at different times, maybe different times of the day. Maybe you're more a perfectionist in the morning when you're getting up, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's your base type. When we're referring to type, it is your go-to tendency, not just, it's not a surface level thing, it's a lot deeper than that. So as you're hearing these, don't just immediately latch on to, oh, okay, I did a stewardship campaign, so I must be a 1. Well, an 8 can do a stewardship campaign, a 2 can do a stewardship campaign, a 9 can do a stewardship. Don't let the surface things fool you. Let's go deeper, and we will as the weeks progress. Type 2, the helper, the caring interpersonal type. 2s are empathetic, sincere, and warm-hearted. They are friendly, generous, and self-sacrificing, but they can also be sentimental, flattering, and people-pleasing. They are driven to be close to others, and they often do things for others in order to be needed. They typically have problems taking care of themselves and acknowledging their own needs. At their best, healthy 2s are unselfish and altruistic and have unconditional love for themselves and others. One thing to be aware of, especially if you're a female, there's a lot of mistyping of females will often mistype as a 2, simply because this is often the role that is imposed in a patriarchal society on the female in our country and other countries. So again, that's why we're looking deeper than these surface things, because you might be the caretaker in your family, but that doesn't mean that that is your base type, or that it even comes naturally to you. And that might be why it doesn't come naturally to you. So you may be like, oh my God, this is awful. This is the worst thing. I'm so stressed because I have to take care of all these people. That is more of a sign of not being a 2. Type 3, called the achiever, among other things. The adaptable, success-oriented type. 3s are self-assured, attractive, and charming. Ambitious, competent, and energetic. They can also be status-conscious and highly driven for personal advancement. 3s are often concerned about their image and what others think of them. They typically have problems with workaholism and competitiveness. At their best, healthy 3s are self-accepting, authentic, and everything they seem to be. Role models who inspire others. I was trying to think of, I believe one book I read said that the personality of the United States is a 3. Ambition, number 1, greatness, whatever, manifest destiny, all of those are kind of type 3 personality issues, personality attributes. Type 4, the individualist. This is the romantic, introspective type. 4s are self-aware, sensitive, reserved, and quiet. They are self-revealing, emotionally honest, and personal, but they can also be moody and self-conscious, withholding themselves from others due to feeling vulnerable and defective. They can also feel disdainful and exempt from ordinary ways of living. They typically have problems with self-indulgence and self-pity. At their best, healthy 4s are inspired and highly creative, able to renew themselves and transform their experiences. Type 5, the investigator. The intense cerebral type. 5s are alert, insightful, and curious. They are able to concentrate and focus on developing complex ideas and skills. Independent and innovative, they can become preoccupied with their thoughts and imaginary constructs. They become detached, yet high-strung and intensive. They typically have problems with isolation, eccentricity, and nihilism. At their best, healthy 5s are visionary pioneers, often ahead of their time and able to see the world in an entirely new way. I've known a lot of 5s. A funny trait in 5s that I picked up along the way was I would be cooking dinner or just cooking dinner both times, and just sometime during the evening, the 5 would just disappear. No explanation. Just go up to a bedroom or a library, and they're just, you look and they're gone. And they just have to recharge and have to be with their thoughts. I've been told they're known hoarders, closets full of maps and various things, all sorts of stuff. But it was really funny once I discovered the Enneagram, and I linked the two, the two people that would disappear like that, and they're both 5s. They turned out to be both 5s. And I had a seminary professor who would shut his office door and put a sign that says nuclear fusion in action or something like that. It was basically a do not disturb sign because he had to just have his thinking time. The 6, the loyalist. One of my best friends is a 6. the committed, security-oriented type. 6s are reliable, hardworking, and responsible, but they can also be defensive, evasive, and highly anxious, running on stress while complaining about it. They are often cautious and indecisive, but can also be reactive, defiant, and rebellious. They typically have problems with self-doubt and suspicion. At their best, healthy 6s are internally stable, self-confident, and self-reliant, courageously supporting the weak and powerless. So one of my favorite stories about a 6, I have stories about all these types, and they're probably exaggerating their type, but pigeonholing people or something, but there's some funny stories. A friend told me that her friend, who was most likely a 6, wouldn't buy a gray car because the friend thought that it would blend in with the road and people wouldn't see and would run over them. So the overly cautious type, the person that really, checks the deadbolt like 6 times and, makes sure to turn all the power surge protectors off during a lightning storm. And that's how I identified a 6 one time. Somebody was, I think they were trying to figure out what their husband was, and against better judgment, we were typing him instead of allowing him to type himself. But I was like, does he go around unplugging things? I was like, yeah. There were just all these clues. Type 7, oh boy, this is the one I know the most because I live with one. The enthusiast, also called the epicure and other names. The busy, productive type. 7s are versatile, optimistic, and spontaneous. Playful, high-spirited, and practical, they can also be overextended, scattered, and undisciplined. Boy, can they be. They constantly seek new and exciting experiences, but they can become distracted and exhausted by staying on the go. They typically have problems with superficiality and impulsiveness. At their best, healthy 7s focus their talents on worthwhile goals, becoming joyous, highly accomplished, and full of gratitude. So if you're looking for a 7, just watch Rosalind Russell in Auntie Mame. They always have hobbies that they abandon randomly. So there would be a sculpture phase, and a bicycling phase, and a watercolor phase, and it's just there's always this fear that the fun's going to end. So like one time I was at a party, and this probable 7 hid a bottle of wine in the bushes because she was afraid that the wine would give out, and then the party would end. So she would have her own security bottle. And so I said, you should take this test called the Enneagram. And it was off the charts 7. I know a 7 from across the room, and I'm drawn to them too. So hence my marriage, I guess. Now, the type 8. Here's another one I know pretty well. The challenger, called the boss in Helen Palmer's terminology. The powerful, dominating type. 8s are self-confident, strong, and assertive. Protective, resourceful, and decisive. They can also be proud and domineering. 8s feel that they must control their environment, often becoming confrontational and intimidating. They typically have problems with allowing themselves to be close to others. At their best, healthy 8s are self-mastering. They use their strength to improve others' lives, becoming heroic and sometimes historically great. So Martin Luther King Jr. was an 8. Now, if you want a very unhealthy 8, Baby Jane Hudson, played by Betty Davis. Something like that kind of figure. Betty Davis was an 8, and she often played 8s and played them very well. Type 9, the final type overview, the Peacemaker. The easygoing, self-effacing type. 9s are accepting, trusting, and stable. They are good-natured, kind-hearted, easygoing, and supportive. but can also be too willing to go along with others to keep the peace. They want everything to be without conflict, but can tend to be complacent and minimize anything upsetting. My nose is itching, goodness, pardon me. They typically have problems with passivity and, and stubbornness. At their best, healthy 9s are indomitable and all-embracing. They are able to bring people together and heal conflicts. So, do you need to all lie down now that you've heard all of that? Or maybe you heard your type and you, quote, feel attacked, as that Facebook meme that goes around says. It will be all right. Remember, I told you that I'm not going to drink and insult you, at least not today. But I will have some more tea. So here are a few things about this typology to keep in mind. 1, whatever type you are, it's your type for life. You don't change types, your basic types. You don't have more than one type. I've had people come up to me and say, oh, I'm a 1 and a 3, or the like. And my response is, no, you're not. You're one or the other. There are reasons that you might identify with a different type, and we'll go into that, kind of situational and stress-based changes where you're more like one thing or the other, but you are what you are. That your type, I think both schools of the Enneagram pretty much teach that your type is inborn. Your personality is inborn, but how well adjusted you are is the nature versus nurture part. So the nurture part is how much you cling to that type, this construct that is created. It's important to remind you too that no one type owns a monopoly on some emotion or behavior. You could, for instance, I think I changed my sentence there and didn't fix this. Let's see, what was I going to say? Okay, here's an example. 9s are not the only people who are capable of experiencing peace or making peace, for instance. The Enneagram is about your root motivations, as I said earlier, so don't let these surface recognitions confuse you about basic type, and we'll get more on that later. The description, the second thing to keep in mind. The descriptions of these types apply equally to males and females, though some of the behaviors might be expressed differently based on culture and various other settings. 3, we are constantly in flux, depending on our mental health, stress level, maturity, etc. So not every single thing in the description of your type will apply to you 24/7. If you were a 2, you might be an unreasonable jerk sometimes instead of helpful. If you're an 8, you might get sentimental and tear up at those grocery store flash mob videos on YouTube, or so I've heard. 4, the types are to be considered neutrally. Oh, I wish I were a blank instead of a blank is not where you want to be going. What the Enneagram teaches is that we can become fixated on our type, and we're more in love with our type and our behavior than we are with the children of God we were created to be, which is called true essence in Enneagram personality type. You might call it the soul, maybe. You might have your own word for it, but the you that is most authentically you, not the you that's reacting to outside stimulus, or the you that you created to buffer yourself from abuse or harm or whatever it might be. 5, this is important. Learn your type, but don't tell other people what you think their type is. This is the hardest thing. Once you get these types down, Palmer says you can almost become psychic. You meet someone and you're just, oh my God, there's a 9. There's a 4, and tattoos and art and, all this stuff of a 4. But you could be wrong. You could be mistaken based on some external thing. 9s get tattoos. 2s get tattoos. Most 4s I know have some tattoos, but not all of them. So now, I will, as a spiritual director, pastor, and so forth, sometimes help give people a nudge if they're having trouble deciding which type theirs is. But my current practice is not to say, oh, you're a 7, you're a 1, etc., etc. If I'm that interested, I might say, I have this cool personality test you should take. Or in counseling, I might say, in marital counseling, it was required. I'm like, okay, you guys, you're taking the Enneagram, and then we're going to talk about it. Sometimes I will call in reinforcement. So Tim is, even though I may know a little bit more about the Enneagram, has some experience with my, typing, and so one time I had somebody that, because he worked at a nursing home, thought he was a 2. He was a 7. A definite 7. It was should have just been on his forehead, tattooed on his arm. The loudest, most 7 I have ever met. And so I asked his permission and said, could I get a second opinion on this? And I had Tim come down. I said, Tim, type these 2 for me. And he was spot on. He guessed the 1 had guessed had tested as a 9, and he's like, oh yeah, he's a 9, and this guy's a 7. Okay, I rest my case. And then we followed up with, there's a sorter that's in this book for people who are having trouble with ties, and we did it, and he was way off 7. So again, that's that, don't let your situation make you think that's what your Enneagram type is. Because 7s can be caring. They can be helpers. It's not always natural to them. But, if you do something for 40 years, like this person had, then it kind of becomes ingrained habit. Sometimes I am surprised at these results based on, surface data that I've observed instead of some of the complexities of the Enneagram. But usually once we get people sorted out, it's like, okay, yeah, I see that. That makes more sense. 6. The goal of the Enneagram is transformation. Knowing your type is just the beginning, not the end of the journey. So it's not about, well, I'm a 2, and that's why I acted that way. That's the exact opposite of the teaching of the Enneagram. You're supposed to reflect and be like, oh, I was acting out of type, and that's really not my true self. That's not who I am. I was reacting to this external stimulus. Most 8s are proud to be 8s. Some, of different types are proud to be their types. But again, that's not the end goal. That's not the point. So take your pride in figuring it out, and then sit with that type and learn about it, and then transcend it to, your true self. So here's an important quotation from Rizzo and Hudson. Our personality is not, quote, bad. Our personality is an important part of our development and is necessary for the refinement of our essential nature. The problem is that we become stuck in personality and do not know how to move to the next phase. This is not the result of any inherent flaw in ourselves. Rather, it is an arrested development that occurs because almost no one in our formative years was aware that any more was possible. If I might summarize, the end goal, according to Rizzo and Hudson, an Enneagram study is to learn the ins and outs of your personality so that you are the driver for your life, not your personality. In other words, your work through observation of your habits and becoming more aware of yourself. Because if you're enamored of your type or your personality, then that's what's behind the wheel. But if you sit with that and you see through that and know that, that's not what you want to be, or that's not your ultimate goal. Gurdjieff called his personality system the Wheel of Sorrows, for instance. So if you relinquish that, then your true self is in control. And your true self will look like some aspects of your personality, but they will be the open, positive, spiritual aspects of your personality. So if you're an 8, Martin Luther King Jr., versus Betty Davis. Though Betty Davis was wonderful, she was not without her problems. Well, Martin Luther King Jr. was not without his problems either, but you get what I'm saying. You can be the best of yourself instead of the average or the worst. And you're at that average level, or even at your worst level, when you're proud of the way that you behave, instead of, when you behave averagely or poorly, instead of relinquishing that. I hope that makes sense. And if it doesn't, maybe it will come to make sense as we study the individual types. So, that might sound liberating for some of you, and it might sound frightening for others. I had a teacher in my spiritual direction program once talk about attending a conference, and they were talking about eradicating the false self or something like that, and she raised her hand and said, "But I like my false selves." Which we all do, of course. We've built this up over a lifetime. So we love our false selves and the parts of our personality that we cling to, instead of transcending them for the greater good. Another story came to mind. That, something that you're not necessarily, a story that you're not limited by type. So this kind nun taught in my spiritual direction program, the class on the Enneagram, and she heard that I was an 8, and she heard that I was also in seminary, and she said, "How's that working out for you?" Because we're not the type to go and, live in a communal setting and take instruction for other people. So, these types can be transcended or used for the ultimate good, and we can become our true selves rather than the selves that we tell ourselves we are. So to close, I want to offer some lists to you that might help in your self-identification of your type before we begin looking at each type in depth week after week. Hopefully this will be helpful. I have several. I think I have about 4 or 5 lists. And so I hope they don't add confusion, but maybe if they do, that, clear as mud will become clear as slightly clean pond water when we get to the individual types. So first is a list of unconscious childhood messages for each type. So these are the messages that we may have received from our parents or guardians and other people, even if they were never spoken aloud. So these are things that we sort of taught ourselves to survive in the world based on our external stimuli. More tea. Then I'll start insulting you. No, I'm just kidding. That tea doesn't even have caffeine in it. Okay, so unconscious childhood messages. Type 1. This is what the type 1 tells themselves. It's not okay to make mistakes. The type 2. It's not okay to have your own needs. Again, this is the little, what do they call it? the angry parent or something. These are the wrong message that you've been receiving. Type 3, it's not okay to have your own feelings and identity. So often 3s are kind of chameleons. And they're the hardest to type because they will be whatever they think you want them to be, often, especially if they're operating at not the most healthy level. So if they're in a class on Edgar Allan Poe, then they're a Poe scholar, and they go to the next class and it's geometry, and they know everything about geometry. They're adaptable, because at some point they got the impression that it was not okay to be themselves, that they had to be somebody else. Type 4, it's not okay to be too functional or too happy. Type 5, it's not okay to be comfortable in the world. Where's your monastic? Type 6, it's not okay to trust yourself. Type 7, it's not okay to depend on anyone for anything. Type 8, it's not okay to be vulnerable or to trust anyone. I believe my psychological exam, one phrase that will always haunt me and jump out at me, it's, Mr. Shipman sees the world as a dangerous place and all people as duplicitous. This was several years ago, but it might make sense why I was such good friends in seminary with a type 6, because we both saw the world in the same way. So we could together not trust people, but I'm working on it. Type 9, it's not okay to assert yourself. So next is a list of basic fears of the different types. So the basic fear of the type 1 is fear of being bad, corrupt, evil, or defective. Type 2, fear of being unworthy of being loved. 3, fear of being worthless or without inherent value. So you see how these can play out in personalities in different ways. Type 4, fear of being without identity or personal significance. Type 5, fear of being useless, incapable, or incompetent. Type 6, fear of being without support or guidance. Type 7, fear of being deprived or trapped in pain. So hence the hidden bottle of Merlot in the bushes for the after party. Type 8, fear of being harmed or controlled by others. Type 9, fear of loss of connection, of fragmentation. Next to last, here is a list of basic desires for each type and how those desires can become distorted. So type 1, the desire to have integrity, which deteriorates into critical perfectionism. Type 2, the desire to be loved, which deteriorates into the need to be needed. Type 3, the desire to be valuable, which deteriorates into chasing after success. Type 4, the desire to be oneself, which deteriorates into self-indulgence. Type 5, the desire to be competent, which deteriorates into useless specialization. I really love that one. There's a lot of that in academia. I'm the PhD in green Berber carpet. But that has a place. That has a place too. I'm certainly not. I'm not knocking it. I know some of those people and I enjoy them. Type 6, the desire to be secure, which deteriorates into an attachment to beliefs. So that's where you run into your uber orthodox people too, that are the 6s. They're going to be checking to make sure that you folded the purificator correctly, or you didn't cross your fingers when you referred to the virgin birth and the creed or something that they're watching. Type 7, the desire to be happy, which deteriorates into frenetic escapism. Type 8, the desire to protect oneself, which deteriorates into constant fighting. And type 9, the desire to be at peace, which deteriorates into stubborn neglectfulness. So finally, on a positive note, this last list is what Rizzo and Hudson call lost childhood messages. Essentially a message that you didn't hear for whatever reason growing up. So, I'm giving it to you today. So here is your lost message, the message you need to hear for each type, and then we'll close up somehow. Type 1, you are good. Type 2, you are wanted. Type 3, you are loved for yourself. Type 4, you are seen for who you are. Type 5, your needs are not a problem. Type 6, you are safe. Type 7, you will be taken care of. Type 8, you will not be betrayed. And type 9, your presence matters. So now that you are completely overwhelmed, overloaded, we'll take a week off next week. I'm going to enjoy that vacation time, maybe get some reading done, coveted reading time. And when we return week after next, we'll dedicate this whole space to the type 1. If you are lost or confused, don't worry. Let go or be dragged, as the saying goes. I think things will begin to make more sense when we get into analyzing the individual types. Today was a whirlwind overview. I basically summarized 35 pages of text for you. Of course, there were 94 total to summarize, but I thought things would get even more confusing. Now you know what it's like to participate in an accelerated course. However, if you come away from this only identifying with a basic type, even if you don't understand every single thing about that type, I think that's a pretty good deal. And it's free, so you didn't lose anything except that hour of time. And I'll be around for several years, I hope, to help you continue unpacking what it means to be a 1 or a 5 or a 9 and so forth and so on. So, were there any questions or comments? Maybe I need to flag down Patrick. Hey, Patrick! Did we have any questions or comments?
We have one comment from Deborah that said she's very looking forward to the course.
Oh goodness. Oh no pressure. But I appreciate Deborah's confidence in my abilities. I don't know that I have matched that confidence. Well, you could continue commenting and maybe somebody will bring it to my attention, or even better, if you have any questions or if you've taken the test and would like to share the scores with me or those insights, just message me. Nearly everybody's connected on Facebook, and if not, if we're not connected on Facebook, there's a way to message the church office, or you can email the church office, or you can email me. So we can do that. Just know, though, that I won't be, if I'm good, I won't be checking my church email next week, so you might not hear back as quickly as usual. Usually my turnaround is 24 hours. I got that from training as an online teacher. because you don't want to disappear when kids never see you. Anyway, you depending on how you message me, you might hear back faster than some other methods. So I'm not neglecting your messages. I'm just going to take a little bit of me time. So I'll be eating some chocolates and reading books and other luxurious things that I don't always get to do, making bread and so forth and so on. So I will see you the week after next when we talk about the type 1.